Hello, and thank you to all of our West Virginia Work staff for joining us for this training from the Division of Professional Development. Our goal for this training is to review the following competencies. What is needed to complete a West Virginia Works review? What is needed to complete a West Virginia Works application? And we will also review closures and sanctions. In the final quarter of 2021, of 42 cases that were reviewed, 13 or 30.9% were found ineligible and the client was referred for repayment. 11 of the 13 cases, or 84.6%, were ineligible due to worker error. Worker errors resulted in $47,701 referred for repayment. All of these errors are a result of missing documentation or signatures discussed in this presentation. Missing signatures on the orientation forms, CSLE or CSLR that was used for the TANF review. There was no DAS-1 completed at application, no rights and responsibilities form at application and/or review, or the client was found to be over assets. First, we will discuss what the application process looks like for West Virginia Works. We will discuss the application interview and also orientation, the PRC, and SSP. Once the client has expressed an interest in applying for West Virginia Works, there are 4 things that need to be completed within 10 working days. The initial contact may be made by phone, mail, email, or in person. These 4 things include receipt of the DFA-2 or DFA RFA-1, orientation when it appears the AG will be eligible, the initial self-sufficiency plan negotiation, again when it appears the AG will be eligible, and the drug screening questionnaire or WVW DAS-1. Next, we will discuss the following application forms: the DFA-2, the DFA RFA-1, the DFA-5, and the DFA RR1. First, we will discuss the DFA-2. This is typically the form used to apply for West Virginia Works. It can be completed as a shelf document prior to the face-to-face interview or printed and signed after the face-to-face interview. It is also known as the CAF or Common Application Form. Anytime the client completes a DFA-2, a DFA RR1 must also be completed. If the client completed a DFA RFA-1, it must be followed by a DFA-2 prior to confirmation of any West Virginia Works benefit. If the client completed the DFA-5, it must be attached to the DFA-2. Remember, for West Virginia Works, when both parents are in the home, both must sign the DFA-2 and the RR1. Next, we will discuss the DFA RFA-1. This is a really useful tool to protect the application date for West Virginia Works. If a client should come to the office to apply but is unable to complete the interview that date, they should be given the DFA RFA-1 to complete. The client will still need to follow up with a DFA-2 RR1 orientation and interview, but their benefits can be backdated to the date of the completed RFA-1. You should not mail the RFA-1 to the client. If they request an application when not in the office, such as by phone or email, a DFA-2 should be mailed to the client. If they do not follow through with the rest of the application process, such as completing the interview, orientation, or DFA-2, the West Virginia Works benefit should be denied in the eligibility system. The DFA-5 is a less commonly used form, but can be quite helpful in the event of a technical failure. When the applicant has completed their application, but a technical failure prevents printing the DFA-2, the client can sign the DFA-5 instead. The DFA-5 should then be attached to the DFA-2 when it is able to be printed. The DFA RR1 should also be signed when the client signs the DFA-5. The client is not required to come back to the office or otherwise sign the printed DFA-2 if they signed a DFA-5. Lastly, we will discuss the DFA RR1. more commonly known as the rights and responsibilities. The DFA RR1 is required each time a DFA 2 or DFA 5 is completed. The client must indicate their understanding of or agreement with each statement by checking the appropriate block beside each statement and signing the form. The worker should provide any explanation and information the client needs to understand the statements. For West Virginia Works, when both parents are in the home, both must sign. Failure to sign the form results in ineligibility. The client must read or have read to them all statements preceding their signature before signing the form. When the client checks no to an item, it does not result in immediate ineligibility. The client has to actually fail to comply with the requirement in order to result in ineligibility. Orientation is an eligibility requirement for West Virginia Works. Orientation is required to inform all applicants about West Virginia Works, the general eligibility policies, and requirements in a standardized, uniform way. Not only is it important that each applicant in a district or region receives the same information, it is equally important that all applicants statewide receive the same information. Each adult and emancipated minor in the assistance group, as well as non-recipient work eligible individuals, must receive orientation prior to approval for the assistance group. Orientation can be conducted in a group or individually. The client or clients must complete 3 forms during orientation: the DFA WVW4, the PRC1, and the West Virginia Works list of local services. Next, let's discuss those orientation forms in a little more detail. The DFA WVW4 Orientation to West Virginia Works is a form that gives a brief summary of some of the requirements unique to Works. The worker must explain the information included on the form and add additional information in response to specific questions. Under no circumstances may delivery of the form to the client with no discussion of the information substitute for a full uniform orientation to the program. The PRC1 Personal Responsibility Contract. This is the first portion of the contract between each of the adults or emancipated minors and the case manager as a representative of the DHHR. This form is standardized for all participants. The second portion of the contract, the self-sufficiency plan, will be individualized depending on the unique goals of your participant. The West Virginia Works list of local services. There is a template available in Chapter 1 Appendix D to assist the local offices in producing a list of local services, which the client may need or be required to use. The list should be individualized to each county or district to ensure that appropriate resources are listed for that area. Another requirement that must be completed prior to confirmation of any West Virginia Works benefit is completion of the DFA WVW-1. The applicant must complete the drug use questionnaire as part of the application process within 10 working days. Any individual who scores 1 or more points or answers yes to question 11 must be referred then for drug testing. Any individual who refuses a drug use questionnaire or a drug test is ineligible for West Virginia Works assistance. If the DAST or test is refused, the client becomes a non-recipient work eligible individual. They must choose a protective payee as well during the period they are ineligible. The protective payee must also complete the DAST. A face-to-face interview is a requirement for West Virginia Works benefits. The interview may be completed by the client or the representative in the office or by the worker making a home visit. When both parents are in the home, both must be interviewed. They can be interviewed separately though if needed. You will be interviewing either the parent or parents, including step parents, the caretaker relative, or the representative. This also includes SSI parents and non-recipient work eligible parents. A lot of the information has been added to orientation and will be discussed with the client at that time. However, any information listed that is not covered in orientation must be discussed during the interview. Cooperation with the Bureau for Child Support Enforcement must be discussed. Explain redirection, good cause, and penalties. Obtain signatures on the DFA AP1 or the DFA AP1A of the relative with whom the child lives. Explain that Medicaid eligibility is determined separately from West Virginia Works, and evaluate eligibility for medical assistance if it's requested. Explain that information is available in the office and from the worker regarding domestic violence, and that the subject is discussed with all clients. If domestic violence is disclosed, you must make a referral to the appropriate resource and develop a plan to assist the client in meeting their West Virginia Works requirements. If domestic violence is suspected or disclosed, the participants do not need to be interviewed at the same time. Separate interviews can be scheduled. We should briefly explain how the Earned Income Tax Credit is a benefit for people who have earned income under a specified amount. Explain how participation in a work activity is an eligibility requirement. Also, discuss the beginning date of eligibility, the PRC, SSP, orientation, the DAST-1, and if the applicant is a caretaker relative, explain the option of being included or excluded from the AG. It is important to explain that non-recipient work-eligible individuals living in the household with an eligible child must also complete the PRC, SSP orientation, and be enrolled in a work activity, as well as meet all other program requirements, or the entire AG will be ineligible for West Virginia Works. Explain the beginning date of eligibility and the importance of establishing eligibility as soon as possible. Of course, the PRC does not have to be completed during the intake interview, but it can be completed at the same time. In the SSP, you should list the goals of each participant and the tasks necessary to accomplish those goals, as well as any challenges or barriers to that participation. The worker must explain that West Virginia Works orientation is required if one has not already been completed. The worker must explain that all applicants must complete a mandatory drug screening questionnaire, penalties for failure to cooperate, penalties for providing false information, and possible referrals to children and adult services. The worker must explain referrals to a substance abuse treatment and counseling program, and a job skills program may be made. When the applicant is a caretaker relative, the worker must explain the option of being included or excluded from the AG and answer the client's questions about the consequences of each choice. Discuss with the client the two post-eligibility options. Option 1, up to a 6-month period during which the former West Virginia Works participant may be eligible for continued support payments and services, or Option 2, the West Virginia Employment Assistance Program, which allows employed former West Virginia Works recipients to continue to receive the West Virginia Works payment they received prior to becoming employed for up to a 6-month period. Explain the need for the client to report immediately when anyone in the AG or a non-recipient work-eligible individual becomes pregnant. Also, if the client indicates they are in receipt of or may be receiving a lump sum payment, be sure to explain the lump sum policy. During the interview, discuss with the client their benefit issuance options. The worker must provide an enrollment brochure to the client and explain the advantages of receiving West Virginia Works child support pass-through and child support incentive benefits by direct deposit, and that enrollment is optional. The client is responsible for all dealings with their bank and for all fees and penalties associated with their own bank account. The West Virginia Works benefit is deposited on the last state workday of the month prior to the month the benefit is due. The CSI benefit is available on approximately the 20th calendar day of the month. Explain how to enroll and disenroll in direct deposit. Explain that the effective date of the first direct deposit is dependent upon the date of submission of the direct deposit enrollment form and the accuracy of the information provided, and this is the responsibility of the auditor's office. It is generally the month following the month of enrollment. Explain that the client will receive the West Virginia Works and CSI by EBT until direct deposit is effective. Explain that once the client chooses direct deposit, that choice will continue until the client cancels it with the auditor's office. Explain that changes in the bank account information must be reported to the state auditor's office after enrollment. Also, explain that when the benefit cannot be deposited into the bank account after enrollment, benefits will be deposited into an EBT account and the client must re-enroll in direct deposit. Explain when the card will be received and that the card holder must call the EBT hotline to create a PIN and activate their card before they can use it. Discuss the importance of choosing an authorized cardholder who can also access the EBT account. Services are available by calling the interactive voice response unit or by talking with a customer service representative. These services include things like activating their new card, replacing a lost, stolen, or damaged EBT card, obtaining a new or different PIN, canceling an authorized cardholder, and checking on account balances. Benefits deposited into the account must be used within 274 days of issuance for SNAP or 365 days for TANF, or those benefits will be expunged. If the client has an outstanding claim, the worker must initiate repayment procedures prior to approving the West Virginia Works benefit. During your interview, you will have discussed the option of being included or excluded from the AG with any non-parent caretaker relative. The form used to indicate the caretaker relative's choice is the WVW 10 Caretaker Relative Option form. Their choice is effective for 12 months. If the caretaker refuses to sign the form, they will be excluded from the AG. This will not cause the case to be ineligible. If the caretaker chooses to be included in the AG, they will need to complete the same requirements of a natural or adoptive parent. This includes orientation, the PRC and SSP, and participation in a work activity. Also, for non-parent caretaker relative cases, the WW3B Caretaker Relative Assessment should be completed. This form is completed at application and reviewed every 6 months. Contact may be made by phone, office visit, home visit, or mail. This form is used to evaluate the needs of the children and the care of the caretaker relative. It will help identify referrals that may be needed or support service payments if there are no other resources available. The West Virginia Bridge model uses the Bridge to Stronger Families, DFA, WVW Bridge, as a tool to help the participant discuss the pillars with their case manager. The pillars are family stability, well-being, job development, job readiness, employment, job retention, and stronger families. This is a very important part of the case management process for West Virginia Works. The WVW Bridge should be utilized in the application process to identify the area or areas the participant would most like to change, and this becomes the goal. These goals can then be outlined on the SSP1 and SSP1A if needed. The DFA WVW Bridge must be completed at home visits and is recommended to be completed or updated at the 12, 24, 36, and 48-month evaluations. As discussed earlier, the DFA SSP1 is part of the contract that is negotiated between each of the adults or emancipated minor members of the AG or non-recipient work-eligible individuals and the worker as a representative of the DHHR. The SSP should be specific to each participant and list the goals and tasks necessary to accomplish goals. These goals should be SMART and include specific assignments and activities for the participant to complete. Prior to completion of that initial SSP, the worker should explore the following with the participant at a minimum. Does the participant state a disability of any kind? The worker must code the case management system when the participant has a documented disability. Is transportation a problem? Is childcare a problem? Does the participant state family problems that would interfere with an activity? These challenges and barriers to participation should be listed on the self-sufficiency plan. It is very important to identify circumstances that impede attainment of the established goals and specify what services are needed to overcome the challenge or barrier. The self-sufficiency plan is completed within 10 days of the initial contact when a client expresses the interest in applying for West Virginia Works as part of the application process. It is understood that this initial SSP will not be as comprehensive as subsequent plans. The SSP will be updated after completion of the assessment process when the case manager has a better idea of the family situation. The DFA SSP1A and DFA CCG1 are optional forms that can be very helpful in goal setting with the client. The SSP1A helps break down goals into smaller steps and can be utilized anytime you're goal setting with your client. The DFA CCG1 Coaching Conversation Guide is used to review and revise goals with the participant. This can be particularly helpful when trying to set goals with the client and they are struggling to identify goals. The CCG1 can help you and the participant discuss each goal identified on the bridge, SSP1 and SSP1A, how their family impacts their ability to reach their goals, as well as how the case manager can assist the participant in reaching goals. When working with applicants with disabilities, reasonable accommodations and services must be available to all disabled participants so that all services and programs are accessible to disabled individuals. Workers must make appropriate referrals to agencies that provide services and assistance necessary to ensure the applicant's successful participation. Referrals for West Virginia Works participants are made using the DFA ADA-1 and a follow-up is completed using the DFA ADA-1A. The worker must use the DFA ADARA-1 Family Assistance Reasonable Accommodations Report Form to capture any information about the barrier and the disposition of the reasonable accommodation request. These types of modifications are required at application and throughout all stages of the West Virginia Works program and continue as necessary through employment or even during an extension of the 16-month limit of benefits. The West Virginia Works Application and Review Checklist is a comprehensive tool that lists all documents necessary for approval of a West Virginia Works case. The checklist must be completed in every application and review, indicating the date the forms were completed and the case manager and supervisor's signatures. The form should be scanned to OnBase following your local procedure. We will look at the application checklist later in this presentation. And now it's time for review. The review process for West Virginia Works is very similar to the application process. We will discuss reapplication forms, the face-to-face interview, and evaluation and renegotiation of your contracts. First things first, when is the West Virginia Works review completed? The West Virginia Works benefit is reviewed annually, but can be reviewed earlier under certain circumstances. Usually this is going to be due to the eligibility system, scheduling a redetermination, due to receipt of another benefit, like SNAP benefits under the same case number. If you approve West Virginia Works in a case that is already receiving SNAP benefits, the West Virginia Works review will typically align with the already determined SNAP review date. This means that when the SNAP benefits are due for review, the TANF review can also be completed. Keep in mind, this means you must schedule the client or clients, if a two-parent household, for a face-to-face interview, and a DFA-2 and RR1 must be completed and signed. If not, make sure that when you review the SNAP and or the Medicaid, that you do not confirm a new 12-month certification for TANF. For caretaker cases, since the WVW-10 is binding for 12 months, if you review the TANF sooner than 12 months with the SNAP, make sure to set an alert to update the WVW-10 at 12 months. Some other less common reasons that you may review the case prior to 12 months, if it is determined necessary by the worker and supervisor, are if there are persons in the AG or non-recipient work eligible individuals who frequently change jobs or work intermittently. The Division of Program and Quality Improvement, or DPQI, has found a client error in the case. The composition of the household has frequently changed and is likely to continue to change. A substantial change is expected, or the household reports expenses exceeding its income. So what should you do as a case manager if you receive a CSLE or a CSLR? A CSLE may only be used to review SNAP benefits. A CSLR may only be used to review SNAP and Medicaid benefits. A phone interview or face-to-face interview is always required for SNAP. Let's take a look at an example. Family support specialist Jessica receives a CSLR for her client. The first thing Jessica should do is check her case to see when the TANF benefit is due for review. If the TANF benefit is also due for review, she must schedule a face-to-face interview with the client to complete the review process for TANF and complete the SNAP and Medicaid review at the same time. If the TANF is not also due for review, Jessica has two options. Option 1, call the client at their scheduled interview time and complete the SNAP and or Medicaid review. When you confirm benefits, make sure you do not confirm a new 12-month TANF certification. Check your review dates. you may need to adjust it. Option 2, schedule a face-to-face interview with a client and complete a review of all programs. Make sure the client completes the DFA2 and all other required documents for the TANF review. This will align all of your review dates. If the client should not complete the face-to-face interview, the TANF cannot be reviewed, and only the SNAP and/or the Medicaid can be reviewed utilizing the CSLE or CSLR. The DFA2 is the only form that can be used for a review of West Virginia Works benefits. The CSLR or CSLE that is used for SNAP and Medicaid reviews cannot be used to review West Virginia Works. With a new DFA2, you will also need a new RR1. As with the application, if both parents are in the household, both will need to sign at review. This means that even if the client completed a CSLE or a CSLR to review their other benefits, a DFA2 must be completed in order to recertify the TANF benefit. You must also conduct a face-to-face interview with the participant or participants of a two-parent household as part of the review process. Appointments can be scheduled in eRapids. Make sure you choose face-to-face interview as the appointment type when setting up your calendar or manually scheduling the appointment. Again, if both parents are in the household, both must be interviewed. They can be interviewed separately though if needed. Let's take a look at how to set up your calendar to schedule your interviews. First thing you want to do is search in eRapids for the reviews that are due for the following month. You can access these by selecting on the navigation menu, Caseload Management, and then Case Task Reminders. From there, you should be able to search Task Type 2, Due/Overdue Eligibility Determinations. Select your county and user ID, which should be your worker ID in eRapids. You can also narrow your search to a specific caseload if you have multiples. The reviews that are due the following month should show under worker activities once you have selected search. In-person reviews that are due will show up under task message as 085 Eligibility Review Office. This allows you to ensure you schedule enough slots on your calendar to allow for all the reviews that are due, as well as some extras to allow for rescheduling if needed. With TANF cases, you will need to take extra care to evaluate what benefits are due for review. There are times the screen may show only a phone interview is due for SNAP. However, an in-person interview and a DFA2 is needed for a TANF review. Never confirm a new 12-month certification for TANF unless the client has completed a DFA2 and R&R. Now that you know how many reviews you need to complete, it's time to set up your calendar. From the eRapids home screen, select Client Scheduling, then Schedule Appointment, View My Calendar, and lastly, Create Monthly Schedule. Here you can set up your schedule for the next month. Notice you are able to select to schedule your appointments around any time you already have blocked or scheduled an appointment. For the times you want to be available for appointments, you should select Entry Type Assignable. To schedule in-person reviews, select it from the appointment type drop-down. Next, set up the begin time and the end time. This tells eRapids that beginning at this time you are available for in-person appointments and that the last appointment should be finished by the end time you selected. In this example, I have selected that I am available 9 a.m. through 12 p.m. This means that I can have appointments scheduled beginning at 9 a.m. and my last appointment time should end at 12 p.m. I have selected a 1-hour appointment time. This allows for 3 appointments to be scheduled each day. One from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., one from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., and one from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., the end time I selected. For recurrence type, you can tell eRapids how often you are available for this type of schedule you have set up. Are you available every day? This will allow for the 3-hour clock of time for in-person reviews every day of the week. If you want to set these appointments for certain days of the week only, select weekly and you can tell eRapids in the weekday section which days you are available for scheduling. You may also select biweekly or monthly. You can then select from the occurrence section how often to allow the scheduling, perhaps every other Tuesday or the first Wednesday of the month. Lastly, you can choose your begin date and end date. This tells eRapids during what dates it can automatically schedule appointments. You can select up to 3 months. Here I have chosen the beginning of the month through adverse action to ensure all of my reviews are scheduled before adverse. During the review for PRC cases, make sure that you have assigned PRC1 on file for your client or clients if a two-parent household. Review and complete the WVW bridge. Utilize the DFA WVW CCG1 and SSP1A if needed. Complete an updated SSP with your client or clients if a two-parent household. A new DFA2 and an RR1 must be completed and signed before a new 12-month TANF certification can be confirmed in the eligibility system. Again, if there are both parents in the household, both must sign these forms before benefits can be confirmed. During the review interview for non-parent caretaker relative cases, if the caretaker has chosen to be included in the assistance group, ensure you have assigned PRC1 for that caretaker on file. Complete an updated SSP1, review and complete the WVW bridge. Utilize the DFA WVW CCG1 and SSP1A if needed. Regardless of whether the caretaker has chosen to be included or excluded in the AG, obtain a completed and signed new DFA2 and DFA-RR1. Also, obtain a completed and signed WVW10 if it has been 12 months since the last one was completed, and a WVW3B if one is due. Remember, a WVW3B should be completed every 6 months. As a reminder, for all cases, income must be verified at application, review, or reported change for TANF. Assets must also be verified at application, review, or reported change for TANF, including checking DMV and obtaining verification of any other assets, such as bank statements, insurance policy records, or bond certificates. For bank accounts, the verification must show identifying information in order to prove ownership of the client. For Direct Express, the client may print their transaction history if they have an online account. They may also request a paper statement mailed to them by calling the customer service number on the back of their card. Again, the application and review checklist must be completed at each application and review. The case manager records the date each of the necessary forms is completed and signs the form along with the supervisor, indicating that the forms are completed, signed, and scanned into the case record, as well as that case and/or PIN comments regarding the application or review have been entered into the data system. Now, what should the case manager do if a form on the application review checklist isn't due to be completed at the time of review, such as a WVW3B? These are only completed every 6 months. If the WVW3B or another form is not due to be completed at the time of review, you should indicate on the checklist the last date the form was completed, and that way you're verifying that it is in compliance. The checklist is a comprehensive tool that includes all documentation necessary in evaluating a case at application and review. This is an easy way to ensure that the necessary steps are taken at case approval, decreasing the probability of ineligible cases being approved and causing a repayment. The case manager and supervisor must sign the form verifying that the required forms are completed and scanned into the case record. Next, we will discuss closures for non-participation. An individual who has applied and is approved for West Virginia Works benefits must have good cause for not participating in a work activity no later than the end of the second month of benefit receipt, or they are ineligible. If the participant is determined to have good cause, the situation must be reviewed and documented monthly. When the participant initially has a documented good cause for not participating or has challenges which must be first addressed, they are temporarily excused from participation. The case manager approves the benefit, enrolls the individual in the appropriate component, and makes any necessary referrals to overcome the exemption or good cause reason. The case manager closes the West Virginia Works benefit by the end of the second month of benefit receipt when the initial home visit has been scheduled, attempted, and documented, and the West Virginia Works recipient has not engaged in a work activity and has not verified a good cause reason. If the client does not comply with other parts of the PRC or SSP, a sanction is imposed. This type of closure is completed in the eligibility system using a workaround, PRD 41. First, you will initiate eligibility and don't confirm any benefits. Override eligibility for the ADCW on the confirmation screen. Change the benefit from pass to fail and enter the failure reason code 189, ineligible, failed to participate in a work activity. Save the override and make sure it's approved by your supervisor. Return to confirm eligibility, check that the benefits are correct, and confirm only the ADCW failure. Next, go to the West Virginia Works request and enter no for requesting this program of assistance. Rerun eligibility. Check that the SNAP benefit amount on confirm eligibility is correct. Check client notices summary for a closure letter for ADCW. If this notice is present, allow the system to send the notice. The text should be correct. If the notice is not found, suppress the existing notices and create a worker requested notice. Create a worker requested free format general appointment letter for the good cause appointment date and time. And of course, record your actions and case comments. When a member of the assistance group or non-recipient work eligible individual does not comply with the requirements found on their PRC or SSP, a sanction must be imposed unless the case manager determines that good cause exists. Once the beginning of the sanction period has started, it cannot be stopped until the appropriate time has elapsed. Sanctions should be a last resort after all case management options have been explored. A first sanction results in ineligibility for cash assistance for 1 month. The client will have to reapply for benefits. If closed for 3 months or longer, they will also need to repeat orientation. The client is ineligible for emergency assistance for the sanction month as well, and SNAP benefits will not increase due to the loss of the West Virginia Works cash assistance during the sanction period. A second sanction results in ineligibility for cash assistance for 6 months. The client will have to reapply for benefits. They will also need to repeat orientation. The client is ineligible for emergency assistance for the first 3 months of the sanction period. And SNAP benefits will not increase due to the loss of the West Virginia Works cash assistance during the sanction period. Second sanction must be approved by a supervisor. If good cause is given for the first or the second sanction, the supervisor must give approval for removing the sanction and make a comment in the eligibility system. The third and any subsequent sanctions result in ineligibility for cash assistance for 12 months. The client is also ineligible for emergency assistance for the first 3 months of the sanction. SNAP benefits will not increase due to the loss of cash assistance for the sanction period. The client must reapply for benefits after the sanction expires and repeat orientation. The DFA TANF policy unit must approve third and subsequent sanctions. An email must be sent to the policy unit members with the date and time of the scheduled case staffing and a detailed summary outlining the reason for the sanction, including the case name, Rapids case number, PEN numbers, current PRC, number of referrals provided to the AG to help remove barriers, the number of home and/or work site visits in the past 12 months, any special or unusual circumstances in the family, and the worker, supervisor, and/or CSM decision, including the reason about whether the family should be sanctioned. A case staffing and a good cause interview must be scheduled prior to the imposition of a sanction to allow sufficient time for a good cause determination prior to the sanction beginning. Once a sanction begins, it cannot be removed. The WVW 75 is utilized to obtain the necessary information that needs to be sent to the DFA policy unit for a decision. If good cause is requested, the supervisor must email the policy unit and program manager requesting the sanction be lifted. The policy unit will make a determination if good cause may be granted. The DFA WVW 75 form was updated in March of 2021. A copy of this form is included in the training materials for this refresh. Please be sure to sign the form prior to sending to the policy unit. Any applicant who refuses a DFA WVW-1 or a drug test is ineligible for West Virginia Works. Any applicant who provides false information on the drug use questionnaire is ineligible for West Virginia Works assistance for 12 months. They must also be referred to repayments for benefits overpaid due to the false information. The false information must be from evidence and not hearsay. Any applicant who has a positive drug test and who fails to complete or refuses to participate in substance abuse treatment and counseling and a job skills program is ineligible for West Virginia Works until they are enrolled in these programs. Upon a second positive drug test, a second substance abuse treatment and counseling and job skills program must be completed. These individuals are ineligible for West Virginia Works for 12 months or until they complete these programs, whichever is shorter. Once they can document successful completion, they may reapply for those benefits 6 months after the completion and must submit to random drug testing. Upon a third positive drug test, the individual is permanently ineligible for West Virginia Works. In any of these situations, the applicant is considered a non-recipient work-eligible individual and must choose a protective payee for the West Virginia Works payment for the other members of the West Virginia Works Assistance Group. In the following circumstances, a referral must be made to Children and Adult Services. Any individual who refuses to submit to drug testing as a result of a drug use questionnaire. Any individual who fails to complete or refuses to participate in substance abuse treatment and counseling program and job skills program as required, or any individual who has had their benefits suspended and has not designated a protective payee or whose benefits have been terminated due to a failed drug test. The case manager must make a comment only that a referral has been made. In conclusion, by utilizing the skills and the tools that we have available, we can reduce agency errors resulting in repayments for our West Virginia Works recipients. If you have any questions concerning West Virginia Works policies, please contact the policy unit. And thank you for all that you do to serve our vulnerable West Virginians.